Welcome to Procurement Block, a podcast all about digital transformation in procurement and supply chain, and how blockchain, risk management, and change management all factor in. I'm your host, April Harrison, Marketing Director for Trust Your Supplier. I'm a procurement novice, eager to learn more from the people who are at the forefront of procurement innovation. On today's episode, I am being schooled by Eric Evans. Eric manages strategic partnerships and alliances at Rapid Ratings, including leading partner API integrations into procurement, supplier risk, and governance risk, and compliance platforms to benefit joint clients. Eric is involved with various working groups of shared assessments, including co-chair of the Continuous Monitoring Group. Eric has over 20 years work experience from various companies, including Aetna, Edgar Online, and Donnelly Financial Solutions. He graduated from the University of Connecticut with a BS in finance and completed his MBA in finance at the University of Hartford. He is based in the Rapid Ratings New York City office and lives with his wife and Cavalier King Charles in Stamford, Connecticut. Today, Eric and I discuss supplier financial health, and while you'll want to go ahead and schedule your doctor appointments. Eric, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Hey, thanks, April, for having me join today. Sure, yeah, would love to. So I work at Rapid Ratings, of course, but I live in Connecticut with my wife and my dog, King Charles Cavalier, and split time between the home office and the New York office reopened. So I'm down in New York a few days a week, and worked at Rapid Ratings about 5 years now, and really enjoy working with our clients around how they integrate our data into different platforms.
A King Charles Cavalier, is that a type of Cocker Spaniel?
It is. So he turns 10 this month, and he is brown and white. So they're quite a lap dog. Great for a condo.
I would love to know, Eric, if you had one superpower, what would that be?
Thanks. I think it would be the ability to fly, just to get to places more quickly and fast, and be in multiple places in a day, and just go far and wide.
I'm with you on that. Right? Eliminate all the airports and,
Exactly.
So far on this podcast, I've been learning about the importance of managing supplier information and the quality of supplier data. So, as part of any supplier assessment, how important is financial health?
Good question. Really important, because it is often a leading indicator of risk and really provides that transparency into what's happening at that company. So while they're numbers, decisions and performance or results are often reflected in those numbers, in those financial statements. So, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. And obviously, there are usually two types of companies, public and private. And private companies can be more volatile, and those shouldn't be ignored, especially, just because a lot of times we found companies we talk to have a hard time getting those financials. So, it's really important, because you want to see that trend line down. Well, if there is a trend line, going south, you want to get in front of those issues more quickly. And equally as important, especially with the bounce back today, with coming out of the pandemic, if companies are supplying something to an industry that's growing really fast or ramping up again, will they be able to keep up with demand? So kind of, I guess last year with the PPE equipment type stuff, but as we know, I ordered, we just got our kitchen done, and so thank God we ordered cabinets when we did, right? So it's like all those type of supply chain issues going on, backed up demand.
How do you recognize the symptoms of a financially deteriorating company?
So we provide key risk indicators and detailed analysis, leveraging around 24 industry models, again, based off the financial statements. So in essence, it's like we're running an MRI or a CAT scan in a way, like a financial health checkup to detect issues early on so our clients can mitigate risk. And we're looking at around 62 ratios and also incorporating and leverage liquidity and earnings performance. So we have like two scores, a predictive short-term score called the FHR that looks at default risk over the next 12 months. And then a core health score looks at really that medium-term viability of a company and how efficient they are from an operations standpoint. So it's very different, than a credit report or payment history. So then we look at the intersection of those two scores and provide like a quadrant analysis and then continuous monitoring trends and then real detailed analysis, that's easy to read and understand.
So you mentioned like an MRI or a CAT scan. So
Yeah.
assuming that these play into like you have like a regular health checkup each year, but there might be times where you have to go in for special assessments.
I think with the pandemic, it really highlighted the fact that while financials may change maybe 4 times a year, obviously, some of our clients, we're looking at some companies every 2 years or every year, once a year. And with the pandemic, the frequency really turned up because they wanted to see how these companies were going to react to the industries that went down really poorly, right? Oil and gas, retail, transportation, a lot of those, went down 15 to 30% in terms of performance last year. So the message there is that you shouldn't be waiting. The frequency really should be done, more often, especially if that company is in trouble. If they're not in trouble, then maybe okay, fine. You could look at that maybe still every 6 months to a year. But if they're really trending down, you really want to keep an eye on them.
So that's kind of to see how resilient they are when you have unplanned events such as the pandemic or a natural disaster or anything like that. Tell me a little bit more about how that plays a role when you have those types of disruptions and volatile market conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good point. So we're oftentimes, a leading indicator. And what can happen, we've done some studies where using our clients' data around timeliness and performance and overlaying that with financial health, it really showed us, confirmed our suspicion that companies that were weak financially were more than 2 times likely to ship a defective product and more than 2.5 times likely to ship something late. And so they could be cutting corners if they're weak financially. They may not be investing in infrastructure, technology. They may not be rehiring people, and that can often lead to not being able to fund programs in sustainability or cyber. And on the flip side, they may not be as resilient if they were to incur a cyber breach or a subsidiary dumping something in a river or conflict minerals or a natural event happening. So oftentimes, the stronger the company financially, they kind of weather those storms better, and especially market conditions if they're well capitalized, cash flow.
Okay, so let me see if I got it. So if the financial indicators can tell you how certain issues can actually end up trickling down, you mentioned it could be quality issues or things like that can have an effect throughout the whole.
Right, exactly. More catastrophic. And what we did last year and still can do is we stress tested, so to speak, the financials by reducing them appropriately by a certain percent based on analyst consensus estimates or the industry they were in, even with pro forma statements. So we helped our clients really, look into a crystal ball to see, how bad or how fast some companies were deteriorating in a couple of quarters because of the, global pandemic. And that was quite helpful. It probably didn't paint a good picture. Companies that had underlying issues going into the pandemic pretty much got worse.
Yeah, there were probably very few companies that increased their profitability. And I'm thinking of like Zoom as one of those.
Yes, right. Yeah, I mean, obviously there were certain companies that did well or increased their sales probably in the pandemic, like a Peloton or a Lululemon, people becoming more casual and wearing, workout clothes at home and things like that.
Right. But
Exercise.
those are sort of the exception rather than
Few.
the rule. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
How difficult is it for procurement teams to stay on top of the financial health of their suppliers so that they can really monitor and track this?
Well, yes, especially if they have a lot of suppliers, they really oftentimes, we find in talking to companies, before they really sign up as a client, they are doing a lot manually. And so they may have one or two people or a team onshore, offshore, Googling, ad hoc requests to look at financial viability, but they might be just running a credit report and then they can't really get the private company financials and they don't do it well, so they give up. And so it's hard to find information on those companies without going to them directly, which is what we do. We primary source them. So I think procurement teams really need to scale, leverage technology, eliminate manual work. So it is difficult unless they really make it, there are some exceptions where they can make it a mandate, put it in the contract, to get financials, but then can they keep up and scale a team? And oftentimes we find they can't write the detailed analysis and commentary around it. So like, what does the number mean? And, leveraging automation is really key.
Part of this, I'm assuming there's a lot of supplier performance evaluations and continuous monitoring needed. And you mentioned a couple of like automation. Are there other best practices or measures to put in place?
Yes. So obviously, we really advocate clients to and help them, get their digital house in order, so to speak, and operationalize financial health, within their sourcing, onboarding, or continuous monitoring, I think workflows. Best practices, you should really look at the private companies, don't ignore them. We rule of thumb, we've seen most supply chains or vendor programs contain 60 to 70% of private companies and 20 to 30% of public. Most people think it's the reverse, that they have more public companies and not a lot of privates. But when what we call segment their supplier lists, we find they're mostly private. And so they should be reviewing the tiers of criticality, determining which ones to rate and on what frequency or cadence. And so another best practice is, again, with operationalizing it, some of our clients have even flagged it in their system that if the company's not sharing the financials with Rapid Ratings, of course we can do it in our platform too, they'll know that company is not being transparent. And so, then they kind of go on a list of, do we really want to do business with them going forward if they don't want to be transparent? And so really another great best practice is to lean into the supplier by collaborating frequently. I know a lot of companies do some, I don't know if they're quarterly or semi-annually business reviews, but with the pandemic, we really found clients leaning into their supplier more frequently. And it doesn't have to be a negative or punitive conversation. A lot of our clients use strategies during the pandemic, like spot buys, extending financing, or paid their suppliers faster, or made investments in them. So ultimately, it's asking the key questions, the right questions, and collaborating with that supplier to learn what's going on, how they can help them.
So if we go back to like the doctor analogy, it's more about preventative possible rather than having to manage an illness or condition after the fact.
Right. Exactly. Digging deeper and, really getting in front of those issues and asking those questions to find out what they're doing or how they could help them or help the relationship, between the two. Or ultimately, do they have to move away from them? If it's a sole source supplier, do they have to find an alternative one? In the drastic cases, but oftentimes maybe they're working together too on different strategies. Maybe it's freeing up, working capital, extending terms, things like that.
Do you find, I'm assuming automation would definitely play an important role in larger companies that have a lot of suppliers. Are there more issues the more suppliers you have and staying on top of the financial health?
With leveraging us, because it's kind of your outsourcing and where we are gathering the financials. So if you have lots of suppliers, we can handle it, but with automation built in, it really does help to streamline the process. And again, it's about baking in those workflows that you may have centered around scores or insights. So then you can have your team, do the right things and perhaps assign it to a colleague, run a deeper dive. And so it can be managed. It just needs to be, I think, really baked into the workflow.
It's important to look at before you actually make the decision to onboard, but then also keeping check on it.
Exactly. If you're doing a sourcing event and it takes several months, let's say you had a group of suppliers you're looking at before you award a contract, you might want to review all those that you end up narrowing down, look at their financial health. But then if it takes a while to sign contracts and it takes another year, once you onboard them, then you should really look at their financial health again and then do it continuously after that.
I appreciate you putting it into terms of healthcare. Since I'm a procurement novice, that really helps with giving me something that I can relate to.
Good. It's like ordering you're going to get your checkups. Obviously, we all go to the dentist, hopefully, twice a year, and you've got your annual checkup, but, you tend to calibrate based on what's happening and if you need more care.
Yeah. And I'm learning the older I get, there's more special routine things that you need to have checked.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Unfortunately. And private companies tend to be more volatile. So, smaller they are, depending on the country they're in, sometimes could affect what's happening. So really, taking that into account, there may not be as many news headlines on them as well, like public companies. And so really, that's where you really want to kind of go under the hood a little bit more. Financials, really do help with, being a leading indicator and again, reflect what might be happening internally at that company as well. So obviously, if sales are going down or if the company's, borrowing more and leveraging a lot of debt, then that's something that you want to get in front of.
So I have something called extra credit time. If you have any advice or hacks you would like to share with our audience who may be like me, a new kid on the procurement block.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Obviously, get started, take action. Don't be afraid of financial health. A lot of people may not know finance other than, checkbooks and things like that, but we make it really easy for someone to adopt and consume our scores because we explain it in very, in English, but very plain, easy to read cliff notes, so to speak, around what's happening at that company. So it's really digestible. I think the other thing is it's really about platform to platform. So really looking at getting your digital, as I said earlier, digital house in order, data hygiene, and then really hooking this into your workflow and process to make it much more automated. So you don't have to think about it and it becomes, a one-off here and there. Some trends we're seeing as well as, inviting a supplier in, to do it once and share it with many. So we have an FHR network, which can be embedded into other networks.
So integrated into, your systems and your workflows. So like you said, it's almost like when you go to the doctor and they say, do you want to go ahead and schedule your next appointment? So that way you don't have to think about it.
Yes,
it's there for you.
Right, exactly. Everything's teed up or pushed to you. I mean, obviously there's a lot more kind of app center models. And so, having different apps, embedded in and having them running in the background as you're kind of doing that sourcing, onboarding, continuous monitoring makes it much easier. So you don't have to think about it.
Okay, great. Where can our audience find you if they want to reach out to learn more about financial health or, the FHR or...
Yeah, I appreciate it. You can contact me, Evans, EVANS at rapidratings.com, or just go to rapidratings.com, and there's a lot of different white papers and things that we have as well.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for schooling me on supplier financial health. I really learned a lot today. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you.
All right. Take care, Eric.
All right. Thanks so much.
That's it for this episode of Procurement Block. I'd like to thank our guest, Eric Evans, for joining me on the show. Procurement Block is produced by Trust Your Supplier. You can reach us at procurementblock.com. Show notes are available on our website, and you can leave your questions and comments via the listener comment form. Thank you for learning with me today. I'll leave you with wise words from Benjamin Franklin. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest.